Hey.
Hey, we're back.
Hey, we're back for another episode of Friday Footnote.
Yeah. We skipped one.
Yeah, we did. We skipped one. We've been really busy. Typically, we record Friday Footnotes and send them out to our patrons only. But I think because we have a special guest today, we're going to make this one public. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our good friend, Lynne Taylor. Lynne, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing fine. Thanks, Julie. Hey, JP. It's wonderful to see
Hi,
you
Lynne.
again.
Yeah, it's nice to hear your voice.
It's nice to
thank
have
you.
you on again. I know that we've had you on many times for our poll quote series and bookmark, but for those who are new to our channel, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and who you are?
Okay. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's always a good thing for us to talk about what in the world is going on. But a little bit about me. My name is Lynne Taylor. Some people know me as Common Core Diva. And I have been raising awareness about the federal and global overreaches in American education since about 2008. And I've been able to have many platforms on which to share the information. I have my own blog, commoncorediva.com. I've also been able to have a new show on Catching Fire News. My show is called Point Blank, and I devote that show to having guests on in local areas across the nation who are fighting against the tyranny that we see that is harming our families. So you can find me there. Then I'm also part of the Liberty Bells, and we've been doing that about a year or so, I think it is. And we look at healthcare, education, politics, the way they all unite. And when I'm not doing that, I'm researching. And believe it or not, we're starting to get some people who are being brave enough to say, hey, can you come to my neck of the woods and speak? So that on top of taking care of my health is pretty much what I do now.
Wow. That is a full plate for sure.
It is. It absolutely is.
Especially since it seems like you're transitioning from maybe the online interview to maybe actually speaking in person, which makes a world of difference, I think.
It does. Yeah. It was crazy because, it was, I'm trying to think when the last time I actually went and spoke. It was before COVID, but then it was like that 2016 election kind of just glazed everybody over, and I stopped getting invitations. And then we had the lockdown, and then it was like, oh no, nobody's going anywhere. And so you did everything virtual. Right. And, I am trying my best to let folks know, hey, if it's so far that we can't work out being in person, certainly let's do virtual if we need to. Suzanne and I are doing that as a team as well. But good. Here's the thing. I have not written an article on my blog since January of 2021 because my schedule has been, was it 20? No, sorry, 22. Sorry. Right. Yeah, it was 22 because my schedule has been absolutely bonkers since the first part of January. And then mid 2022, I got diagnosed with breast cancer. And so it was like, okay, now how do I do this and everything else I've been doing? So I had to let a little bit go.
Yeah. Right.
But you have to take care of yourself. And so we're this side of the lumpectomy and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just trying to take care of myself because I know the traditional is not what the doctor told me I needed. And I'm so thankful for that because I know that makes you sicker. So I've been able to kind of come back with a big increase in energy. To do everything that's going on, but I still have to make sure that my stress level stays kind of low, which in the times we're living is an oxymoron. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah,
absolutely. So we'll blunder through, and it is what it is. But as long as we still have the gift of free speech, we need to use it because I'm going to tell you. There are some draconian measures out there by our Congress that seek to totally rip that from us. But that's kind of not where we need to go today. Where we're going to go today, I think, and if I can bring this up and then you guys can speak to it, is that we are so used to this crisis survival. And it's recently come to my attention by listening to this one lady. Her name is Kathy O'Brien. I listened to an interview she did, and she was talking about the nationwide mind hold of this crisis survival. And she went all the way back to at least, she went back a little before 9/11, but definitely from 9/11 to where we are now. If you look at the series of events, not just in America, but across the world, it's been this crisis survival, but it's not really a survival.
No,
Right.
It is a pretended state of survival so that when the next whammy hits you, or like whack-a-mole, you're going, well, what was that? Oh, wait a minute. Oh, no, they're here to help. No, they're really not.
Right.
Well,
right.
I remember the lead up to 9/11, that summer before 9/11. And, and we were seeing this a lot prior to that. And that was that the media was just going absolutely crazy. There was, and I remember this because it just seemed so over the top at the time, that the media was finding crazy events and controversies and political controversies, but scandals. That's the word I'm looking for. Lots of scandals and lots of just craziness leading up to that, and then it happened, and then everything kind of went, kind of quiet, and then it went nuts, right? Again.
Yeah.
One of the things too that I keep telling people that we said from the very beginning, starting 3 years ago when we sat in a little park in Pittsburgh, PA called Shenley Park. And this was about a week after the national emergency was declared. I said, okay, everybody, your life is going to be a series of little 9/11s from this point forward. There will be a constant rotation of news items that will literally grab you by the throat and scare the hell out of you. So just be prepared. So
yeah, and I remember that broadcast. It was very chilling. And I know you probably got a lot of people going, well, what kind of dope are y'all smoking? That's not what's going on. But it was interesting because this lady, and I highly urge, if your audience has not heard of Kathy, that you look her up, because what she has experienced in her life, you would think, holy cow, this is straight out of a novel. But she is an MK Ultra survivor. And if you know anything about MK Ultra, people are not meant to survive that level of mind control. And it was ordered that she was to be killed, but someone came in and saved her.
Wow.
But here's what I can tell you that Kathy told you, and you may want to have her on for your guest, was that this social engineering that we're seeing in its present form actually can be traced back to the Cold War. And in America, it has been wham, 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 wham ever since. Now, one of the things to back this up, that it's not just America, because I'm not sure how wide your audience is, but certainly we all know somebody somewhere else. I have found some documents from Britain where they're showing, here are some declassified documents from our government that are showing, hey, we've been doing this too. And you look at some of the I think it was the 2017 bombing, and how quickly all the hashtags came out and all the posters for unity and all this. And the reason why was because some of it had been so pre-planned that by the time this event happened, well, wham, let's get everybody in line, and boom, barrage the public with all this feel good, we're here to help you kind of BS.
Right. Yeah, we've noticed that for a lot of these things that take place. And that bombing took place like around the time of I believe like a G20 summit, even Scotland. It was in Northern England or Scotland. Because I know this because I remember talking to our friend Paul Kudnick, who's on our Pull Quote show a couple times, and he was talking about how that event distracted their protest at the summit.
Right.
And there were operatives, he supposed, but I'm pretty sure that was going on. There were operatives among the crowd that were basically saying, oh, well, I guess we should just like pack up and go, because, and acting as if they were the leadership, and that it came, and basically started the rumor throughout the crowd. And it basically motivated people to pack up and go because of this event. So this event
they
got extra mileage out of it.
Right.
I'm sure they did. Now I know that for those who are going to get this in archive form, I know that there were some links that I sent you, and I hope that your audience will take the time to educate themselves on this kind of stuff.
We'll put them in the show notes.
Yeah,
for sure.
But what is the crazy thing to me is the more I listen to Kathy, the more I'm sitting here clicking over all the research that I've done, and I'm sitting here going, this kind of sounds like the Himmler research that they did, where it was about abuse response, and that it would take as little as 3 generations of this abuse response for us to become more compliant. And if you look at some of the timelines, especially since 9/11, aren't we on like our 3rd or 4th generation?
Right. So 9/11 was 23 years ago.
Oh my Lord. Wow.
Yeah.
So
that dates us all, doesn't it? Ooh.
Yeah. So you're right about and so the cataclysmic dangerous things that are constantly being thrown at us, and then the response to that. So this trauma response, it suspends things like your memory, so that you can't remember how governments in the past or the state in the past had done some bad things to the people in the past, so you forget. And I also think that trauma is generational. I think it's inherited in your body. It reinvents itself in your body. I mean, we see it in our neighborhood.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our neighborhood, for those of you who don't know, we talk about this a lot, is a neighborhood of deep poverty. But not only that, I mean, we see trauma from the results of the opioid so-called crisis that was imposed on the public 10, 15 years ago, where we see the shelled out husks of people who are still living with that addiction that they acquired as a result of all that. And then just the other stressors that come about through just living in an impoverished community, in a community that lost its focus through job loss, through NAFTA and other things. And so you see people without purpose who have become addicted because of the stress and the trauma. So all that trauma is, you can see it in the body language. And something that I mentioned to Julie when we first moved here was that I never understood understood the concept of somebody being bright until we moved here, because we used to live in San Francisco, where people were lit up. They lived, right? And they were alive, and they had purpose and whatever. Even the homeless people generally, did not look like they were dull.
Right.
I came here, and I think that and I saw this dullness in people's eyes.
Yeah.
And I believe that it's because of the generational stress and trauma that has taken place here over generations, not just recently.
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing how that can affect a community.
And you're absolutely right. But now, we all have stress every day just from simply living, because we have the daily struggles. Yeah. But when you have your government tweaking the pot, when you have your media out there gaslighting you at every possible turn, it's like you're in this constant barrage. And you're right, it dulls your mind. But that was the point Kathy was bringing up. That is the whole thing about government controlled mind intervention, if you will. And let's think about it. I think we did this on a show when we talked about how this is coming up through the social and emotional learning in education. Right. If you trace America's use of propaganda from a government level on the people, go back to Edward Bernays. He was a government paid employee to do what? Barrage the nation with why smoking was so acceptable for women. It wasn't just for men, it could be for women too. Now, untold amounts of money went into that campaign at a national level. And what was the government objective? Was it to prop up women's rights? That was the talked
The
about.
framing. That was
That
the
was the
framing.
talked about benefit. But what was the real benefit? Was it to make us sicker and more dependent? I believe so.
Mhm.
If not, why would we see this abuse response continue and go on for generations? And it makes sense when you talk about, okay, well, that was back in the 20s or 30s, and fast forward to the Cold War, then look at what happened after that. And it was like, holy cow. But it grooms you when you're in this constant cycle of crisis survival or abuse response. It grooms you to become more robot-like. And if you are robot-like, you 9 times out of 10 really don't think for yourself. You let someone else do your thinking, which is very dangerous because that starts to impede on your critical thinking, the God-given ability to put 2 and 2 together and actually come up with 4, rather than, well, 2 and 2 is whatever the teacher tells me or whatever the government tells me is supposed to be my response to whatever. It also is being used by our government because they realize to keep tyrannical reign over us is going to take concerted effort because there are fewer government people than there are supposed free citizens.
Mhm.
And if you could control the free with just a few little strings, guess what?
Yeah.
You got a win-win if you're on the wrong side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, remember that animation we saw, and it was Rose. What was the name of that anarchist couple?
Rosa Negra, was it?
No.
I don't know.
Yeah, it was like a bird and a.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
It's okay.
They had this animation of like this huge crowd of people being bossed around by like maybe 3 or 4 individuals, and the 3 or 4 individuals were basically the government, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was basically illustrating,
You're talking about Larkin Rose?
Larkin Rose.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Larkin Rose.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's why I was like a bird and a flower. It's Lark, and
Rose,
Larkin Rose.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, and it got really long and tedious, but he made a very good point. It was a very great visual example of exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. Well, here's the thing. You were talking about light people and dull people, and you're absolutely right, because what this continued cycle has done to us is that it erodes your quality of life and it mutes your soul. And let's think about it. The eyes are the window to the soul. And if your eyes are dull or sick, it shows. If your soul is okay, then your eyes are going to show that too. So it's no wonder you're seeing people walking around kind of just in this state of like a dark fog, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's true.
And I think, what was my other point? Well, I mean, I think that it's even, and we've talked about this, Julie and I, that it's even affected sort of lifestyle changes over the years. That this influence coming from the state has affected us in so many ways that we can't even imagine. Culturally, lifestyle-wise, diet.
Yes.
And like promoting something that maybe like really unhealthy for you, but looking like it's healthy, right? I mean,
My pyramids is a perfect example.
Exactly, yeah. And I'm even suspicious of the influence that came down when I decided to become a vegetarian. There was a movie going around at that time that was like, I forget what it was called. It was basically, meat is murder was the message, and I can't even remember the name of the movie, but it was influencing a lot of people at the time.
Oh yeah,
right.
And I wasn't one of those people. I talked to people who had seen it, but I was already on my way to looking into a vegetarian diet, and I have been since. but I'm seeing that there are some health issues that I'm facing now as a result of that
Right.
may have been intended.
Well, and here's what I'm going to tell you is that I did recently a show on the podcast called The Reason We Learn, and we addressed this from the school nutrition standards, because the school nutrition standards sound like, oh, well, this is going to be just applicable to school kids. No, the way the government is setting up the school as the community hub, it feeds the community. And I'm sure you guys have seen that in person in your area, because the school is the central place. So it makes sense for the government to come in and say, oh, well, let's give Johnny and Susie and Johnny and Susie's family access to health care and nutrition and this and that and the other. And of course, those funds come through the Department of Agriculture for the school nutrition programs. Well, we looked at the proposed standards, and yes, that is precisely what they're trying to do, is set you up for a body that is not as capable of fighting off garbly goos by taking out things like real dairy and putting in nut milk, or taking out meat and less throwing in plants. Now, here's the thing. Here's why I wanted to bring this up, because the lady who runs this particular podcast, Deb Philman, she doesn't live that far from me, but she has a very, very intense knowledge of what builds the body and what doesn't. And she explained it to the audience that in the meat, there are key amino acids that we need to help fight off disease. But if we keep listening to all the rhetoric about meat is murder, cow farts are killing the planet, that sort of thing, we're going to buy into, oh, yes, let me go and eat all the vegetables. And when I told her that they're now targeting children, she gave a perfect example of her own family, where there was an issue with one of her children not being able to process whatever it was, but it was because there was that meat with the amino acids that could help bring up the muscles and the bones and all the things that plants can't do. But if you are one who looks at the Bible, you'll see there was a very precise eating plan that was to be for us to be our best at all times, which was every herb, every plant, and then certain kinds of meat. And meat was not every day, 3 times a day.
No,
Right.
And it was, but you needed it. And you also needed dairy, but it wasn't cow, it was goat, because goat was way more digestible, friendly to the human body. And if you look at some of the bugs that are being now proposed as to take the place of meat, our bodies were never designed to break down those things, and they will make us sicker. There's one called chitlin. Okay. It is only digestible by a bird. Are we a bird? Do we have a bird's DNA? Do we have the bird's digestive tract? No, we don't.
The birds have to eat gravel in order to digest as well.
And that's right. But think about all the poisons that go into what we treat our food with, and these same critters eat that, and then we go and we eat them. And now we're going to say, well, oh no, I can't eat the bird, but I can go eat the bug that the bird eats.
Right.
Well, this chitlin promotes diseases, especially cancer. And what is the government working on right now? Cancer moonshot.
Oh my gosh.
Right. The cancer moonshot.
Of
right.
course.
Wow. And,
it's all connected.
It all is connected. And I sort of remember hearing a story about the Rockefeller, John Rockefeller, like creating the what was it, the lung association or the heart association, one of those associations, while at the same time promoting smoking. Right. So this is an old playbook.
Oh, it absolutely is. But let's think about it. Rockefeller muddied the waters in healthcare way back when. And and that particular foundation is the one that's at the bedrock of this. And we've talked about this before on one of our previous shows, the social and emotional manipulation through those adverse childhood experiences, those surveys that the kids have to take, where it's, hey, how's home life? What's going on in home life? Are mom and dad making you do things you don't want to do? Does anybody drink? Does anybody smoke? Does anybody hit you? Does anybody make you have sex with them? Does anybody force you to go to church?
Right.
And all these things that are frankly none of the school's business, but
Right.
because Rockefeller started this and then took it over, and Kaiser Permanente got involved, and then the CDC got involved, they come up with this cockamamie scheme that if we somehow eradicate every negative experience known to mankind for any student, they'll somehow grow up to be fat, dumb, and happy and be very successful because they'll be able to stay out of prison. No, let's think about this.
It's the opposite.
We have good and bad emotions for a reason.
Right.
You cannot survive without all good or all bad, because if you're all good, then you're going to have this just skewed view. If you have all bad, you're going to have a very skewed view. But they're supposed to interconnect to help you stay in balance, so that you, first of all, can be a very self-contained person who goes, you know what? I have good sense. I recognize when I get upset, and you can either handle it well or you can handle it poorly. But what this whole scheme is doing is saying, well, if we wipe out all the negative, then there's nothing but positive. And I understand that that makes sense in one way, but here's the part they don't tell you. When that negative finally reaches that boiling point within each of us, we do one of two things. We either implode and hurt ourselves physically, mentally, or however, or we explode and we start hurting others. Now, just look at the headlines.
That's right. We are looking at the headlines. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I think,
yeah.
and whether these people who are allegedly shooting up schools and other locations are real people or just personas, the message is the same, right? That you better not go out there and do this kind of thing because this is bad. But at the same time, so you get these mixed messages all the time, right? And it supports that mixed message. And even in the corporate sector, it's like, understanding like how to conduct yourself in a normal way is not the way you do it in the corporate sector. You have to you can't express any negative emotions whatsoever.
Right.
Otherwise you become targeted as somebody who's a problem, and then they let you go. And it's suppressed in such a way that it makes it very hard to express yourself in a way that like you're trying to raise an issue or criticize something without looking like you're being a negative person. It's a very fine,
right. You're
line, a very narrow bridge to cross.
Yeah, you're right. But here was the thing about this whole resilience thing that Rockefeller and Kaiser and CDC came up with, was that, if we somehow make it this way, then everybody will be a great contributor to their society. And so if you look at the Resilient City movement, you will find that there are over 100 cities, not just throughout America, but throughout the world, where they've set this mindset up. It was supposedly, like I said, supposed to stop the school to prison pipeline. What it's doing, though, is it's propping you up so that you're not really thinking clearly. Therefore, you don't really have a lot of freedom, because in some of these cities, they're finding that they're having more problem with homelessness and job loss and all these other components that this model was never supposed to factor in, because after all, that wasn't how it was working on paper. But when you don't have a free thought, when you don't have true freedom, you can't resist.
Right.
And I know you guys will love this, but the model city for resilience that Rockefeller handpicked was San Francisco.
Yeah, and we see that every day.
And you see it. You do. You've lived it. You know exactly.
Yeah, and
it's falling apart.
We did a program, or we did a video called Resilient Cities, and it was about that program.
Yeah, it was a cartoon.
And it was an animation, and so our listeners can go out there to YouTube and find it. It's called Resilient Cities.
Right.
And it's so we know exactly what you're talking about. I hadn't even, but we didn't even delve into what you're describing.
Right. Oh, well, I certainly did, because it was coming straight for the kids through the school. And here's the thing that just shocked me when I went to see the documentary on this. It was all about how we had to get the community involved to save Johnny and Susie. Well, isn't that mom and dad's job?
Right.
But we had, for example, the entire statewide police organization back this up. We had the statewide council of churches back this up. That, oh yes, more community involvement. So just think the village raising your child. But I will counter that with, okay, look what happens when that becomes the village idiot and your village is looking for them.
Exactly.
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to make fun of it, but it's horrible. Yeah. It is absolute. Yes. Have people connect to your family, but it should be at your choosing, and it should be who you want to connect with, not the government coming in and, oh, well, we've got this fabulous new program. Because I talked with a person, I think it was out of Washington State, that has one of the resilient cities there. And she was like, I could tell you, since this resilience has come in, we've gone from a viable city into a city with 3 times the homelessness, 3 times the job loss. The crime level is up. But remember, it was supposed to reduce the school to prison pipeline. Because there is no school to prison pipeline. That is a manufacture of misrepresented data from the government, because our government is trying to create more problems so they can rush in to be the savior. And I'm telling you, I know, your listeners know, but it's like we've got to start remembering, if we don't address the government as our abuser, then it's going to be like what I posted this morning on Twitter. It's going to be, you're so trusting of the government that your pronouns are going to be was and then.
It's right. I retweeted that. I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I got that from somebody else, but I wish I could say I thought that up. But it's absolutely, I mean, we laugh about it, but we've really seriously got to shake our minds loose and get back to what we know as our natural rights, our God-given rights. Those the government can't take. They're trying to at every juncture they possibly can. I mean, you talked about it earlier, JP. They're controlling our food. They're controlling, Julie, I think you've talked about it before, if not on this show, on other shows, about controlling your health care. It's insane.
Well, we've been seeing this type of action, like, so many things have been taken away from people to disallow them from having the village raise a child in a holistic, authentic way.
Yeah.
Right. 500 years ago, I think it was, I don't know. I've been trying to do some more research on this. There's historians out there that probably correct me, but 400 or 500 years ago, we started seeing the loss of the actual commons, where the common lands that people used to graze and farm on as a community were privatized and taken away. And then that loss of ability to take care of yourself and then start working on a farm that others owned produced less food for yourself. And women now had to make a choice about, how they were going to take care of their families.
Right.
And there were natural forms of birth control that were being used that were then called witchcraft.
Oh yeah.
By the state and its support of the church. and they vilified people for trying to take control of their own lives because they couldn't afford to feed that many mouths that they used to be able to afford, that they actually needed to help support themselves on their own, like raising food and things like that.
Right.
And I guess my point is that this has been going on a long time, that the ability for people to just be right, and live in harmony with one another as well as with nature,
Right.
Has
been removed
right.
piece by piece by piece by piece, to the point where we become so dependent, and it's now becoming to the point where the government is saying, yes, but you can use your own village to raise children, but we don't know how to do that, and it's in a context that disallows people to do that without intervention from outside.
Right. And, here's the thing. If you go back and you look at history, multi-generational families living together was that holistic community for that child. And that's how it was supposed to be.
Right.
And, they weren't told, okay, mom and dad, you have to let them reach a certain age, and then boom, they're out on their own. That has been something that we have seen down through history happen. I'm not saying keep your, don't groom independence, but it was a thing of the successful, holistic, multi-generational was so successful that they might have opportunities to go out and be independent, but 9 times out of 10, they were able to take advantage of that independence, but still choose to come back because this was the people they wanted to walk through life with.
Right.
I don't think the government really understands the damage they've done by destroying that model of community, and they've redefined it and replaced it with what the government thinks your community or your holistic approach to your child is. And what are they basing this on? It certainly isn't the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. It's not even the Bible. It is best practices, or what evidence shows. Well, when you consider the fact that research is showing you the evidence is skewed, what dope do they think we're smoking to buy into this? But it's because of this generational mind control that this is how we do it, and this is where the government comes in, and this is what the government can do. But have we really stopped to look at every time that's thrown at us, how much more they're taking? It's kind of like the commons you were talking about, JP. They've taken so much of our common land in each of us. We're not our own.
Right. And I think what you're describing in, like, having, the extended family unit and the, and the community is what we would call both collective autonomy and individual autonomy, right? You cannot have a strong community without strong individuals,
right?
But you also have to stick together as a family unit or a group or a community in order to survive. And you depend on each other to a certain extent, but your strong individual creates that support system, and it's a network, right?
It absolutely is.
I think that's why, and I don't mean to cut you off, Julie, but that's why we see the popularity or the rise of popularity among people looking at the Amish. What were you going to say, Julie?
Oh, I was going to say that to Lynn's point, the government has a goal, and the goal is to reduce the population. It is what it is. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's not it's the goal is to reduce the population.
Yeah.
They don't want to share the wealth. So every single person I know, Lynn, in my age range, every single person I know, their parents told them, get out of the house by age 18. Get out, go to college, graduate from college, get your own apartment, and get out of the house. Get out, get out, get out, get out. You cannot get out fast enough. And every single person I know does not have children. Every single person I know in my age bracket that I have a social relationship with, from San Francisco, where I grew up, to Pittsburgh, that is considered Generation X, does not have children.
Wow.
Every single person.
Wow. That is really something.
Yeah. So there's an entire generation of us
Mm-hmm.
that have not repopulated the planet. And so that idea of not staying home and not having multi-generational, family members under the same roof, helping to raise up the children, has promoted this idea that you should not have children.
Mm-hmm.
That is absolutely insane because, I grew up with my grandma in the same house. I mean, she was always there. And I knew I had mom and dad. And grandma was not the same as a parent. But because we all lived together, first of all, we did that because we couldn't afford to live apart. Okay, so it was necessity. But the fun we had, the experience we had, the things that she could tell us and teach us that my parents couldn't was off the charts. And it was like, this is really cool. And I want to go hang out with these people. So, yeah, I eventually moved out, but I also came back.
Right. And so
there's some sort of shame about, if you have to come. And I'm like, why? You're coming back to the people who help nurture you and accept you and the people who have to help take care of you.
Right.
What's shameful about that?
Right, exactly. So you had an experience where you actually grew up with your grandmother. When I think of the term grandmother or grandparent, I immediately think of something like this. A grandmother or a grandparent or a grandfather is somebody that you go visit a few times a year, or they'll come and visit you.
Right.
And that's it. That's the kind
of.
I
had one of those too. I did. And the relationship with her was totally different. In fact, she had no use for any of my brothers and I until we reached a certain age, because according to her, all children were in this not very flattering category.
Oh my goodness.
So we had one that fully accepted us, lived with us, made cookies with us, took us places, lent us money, did anything that was needed to help us. And then we had this other one who pretty much told us, well, you're worthless till you reach a certain age. So yeah, that's what I grew up with.
Wow. Well, it's gotten to the point where it's an anomaly, and it's almost considered like weird to have a multi-generational household in American families.
Middle class America.
Middle class America. Right. That's a good point, because we have some neighbors right across the street who are doing that very thing, where there's 3 generations in one house.
Right.
And it's weird.
Yeah.
I don't think it's weird, but what I'm saying is it's considered weird, right?
It's considered weird by the American standard.
Right.
Exactly. And I have multi-generations here, and I don't mind. I really don't, because I like that we get along. I like that we want to talk to each other, and that we want to eat together. And if we want to go have our own space, or if we want to go do our own thing, Lord knows we can do it. So, there's freedom in that. But if you keep curtailing the family, you're removing even that.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's part of the point, I think, that leads to your point, Julie, about the depopulation.
Right. And just the breaking apart and the splintering of the family.
Well, yeah, because if you really want to weaken someone, if you really want to go after them, you don't necessarily go after the person, you go after their family.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Think about all the movies we've seen where they do that. Somebody's made some noise and, we're going to go take a hostage, but we're going to take Johnny or Susie, or we're going to take mom,
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And then they spend the rest of the movie trying to get the whole family back together.
well, and we've noticed that too, the weakening of communities and societies through, they may not be considered official programs, but again, coming back to that idea of influencing lifestyles, influencing education, influencing, nutrition and what we eat, but like breaking up people through, again, stressors, or in this community where we have such a high degree of Section 8 housing, that it was intentional that they started pushing people into this one community, which creates a lot of stress for everybody involved, because you now have a situation where there's people that are coming in from the outside, and those people that are coming in from the outside have no sense of community. They have no ties to the town.
They have no sets of place.
They don't have the same sort of strong social ties.
They don't care about the history of where they live.
Right.
Exactly. And they don't have those strong social ties that the people who live here have. And so you get this dichotomy, which then works against each other, but then you're weakening the entire community as a whole. By doing that, right?
You absolutely are. Well, one of the things that I sent you guys, and I hope that people will take the time to look at this. This was an article that was put out back in 2016 by the American Psychological Association. And it was all about the psychologist of the Nazi mind. And so we have this Gustav Gilbert. He was an American U.S. Military person. Now, here's the thing. He supposedly went to Nuremberg to grill all the Nazis who were on trial for crimes against humanity. And it says here he did some tests, but mainly most of his research was through just conversing with the people in prison. But here's what I wanted folks to hear that goes into this conversation. After the trial, Gilbert's status as a psychologist of the Nazi mind, remember that abuse response model, after his status as the psychologist of that, it was eclipsed by a young psychologist who had begun work on an experiment at the same time as Gilbert. His name was Stanley Milgram. And Stanley Milgram was notorious for his obedience experiments. And what in the world has happened to us? Those experiments that were started on critters went to people. And then when it went to people think, well, he did his experiment. We never heard anything else about it. No, the results that came from those experiments, we're living it out.
Wow.
Right. Yeah.
Because people always look to Stanley Milgram as this sort of hero that exposed, the abuse trauma response or whatever, or the mind control, obedience testing and stuff. They don't actually what you're saying is that those tests and those models and that criteria was then implemented throughout our government and instigated onto the population. Is that what you're saying? Go
look at the PSYOP that goes on in the military and then compare it to Milgram's. Or go look at the Rorschach. Go look at the Rorschach model of assessing your mind. And if people don't know what that is, the ink blots. We've seen episodes of shows. I think Frasier comes to mind where the therapist was holding up something to Daphne and she's sitting there going, oh, well, it's and she would say whatever it is. That's the ink blot.
Right.
And that was supposed to test where your projectivity and your ambiguity is. But then after that came the thematic apparition, I believe it is, which was Harvard bred from the 1930s because it's now being embraced by the National Institute for Health for the 21st century citizen.
Wow.
Man.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's a never-ending cycle of oh my stars.
Well, we can even see that sort of Milgram thing going on in the COVID experiment, right? Where
COVID
people basically turned on others that they did not agree with.
Right. And it's still happening. The turning on others. I mean, we're seeing in the latest movement, Biden just announced today that today is something like Trans Aggression Awareness Month.
Today, no, it's Awareness Day, and then tomorrow's supposed to be the vengeance. And here's the thing that we need to understand: this is the potential of an absolute horrible situation because you have folks who are highly agitated with weapons, and whether you agree with their stance or not, highly agitated people with weapons does not turn out well. There is a way to address this so that they feel heard. I don't think vengeance is the way. I really don't.
No, of course not.
So what is this about vengeance associated with what was this thing with Biden and vengeance and what?
No, awareness.
Awareness?
Yes, awareness. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
hang on.
It's Awareness Day. And,
Okay.
And the first week of April, starting from April 3rd, is COVID Awareness Week or COVID Awareness Month.
Oh, aren't we just so blessed?
So aware.
Yeah, well, you know what
Yes.
April is.
April 1.
April
Well,
Fool's
starting
Day.
from April 3rd to April
Okay,
2nd.
all right. So April 3rd.
I
Okay.
have to tell you guys, watch for it on Twitter tomorrow. But this is what I am going to tweet out. Hang on just a second. I have to, for those who can't see it, I want to describe this. Okay, you're going to see this picture. It's in a circle, and there's going to be the Capitol building, half red, half blue. And underneath it, it says Congress. And I have written over the image and said, the cruelest practical joke played on we the people every year as long as we don't hold them accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Hashtag Common Core Diva.
Nice.
All right. Can't wait to see it. I will definitely retweet
Yes,
it.
you will have to absolutely. And we need to make that into a bumper sticker, not because my name is on it, but because of the truth to that.
Right.
And you look at what Congress has passed when it comes to some of this stuff. If you go to congress.gov right now and type in the subject mental health, the bills at the congressional level are off the charts. And then go back and look in the Constitution. Was mental health ever mentioned as a federal government entity? No, because education wasn't either. But here we have a government who has taken the de facto rule and applied it liberally to every aspect of our lives.
Wow.
Well,
That's a mic drop.
That is a mic drop.
Applying it to every aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
Every aspect. I think I mentioned in one of my audio broadcasts something about they're even getting into the bedroom. Like you are not safe from every aspect of our lives statement that you just made. I mean, people really need to take it seriously.
Right. Well, that reminds me when you said going into the bedroom, I did an article. It's been years, but it's on the blog, commoncorediva.com. Type in marriage.
Okay.
Because I did an article where I showed you, I think it was based out of New York State, how the Common Core state standards had taken it beyond K through 12 education, as we know it's supposed to be, cradle to grave, was not a mistake, but they started applying it to marriage counseling and the garbage that was going on there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's why I said every aspect, because as you guys both have said on this episode and on others, this is a systematic encroachment of everything that we know to be the way it should be and turn it into something that suits their narrative.
Right.
And that totally pees on our life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It totally pees all over it.
That's a good way of putting it.
Right.
It really does.
Well, if the shoe fits, wear it.
I remember David Martin talking about that phrase "pursuit of happiness," and he was saying that I think he was saying that it was taken the pursuit was added in because it's
really?
like if you think about it, it's like the pursuit of happiness is different than happiness.
Than actual happiness.
They should have put life, liberty, and happiness into the Constitution, or was that the
not just pursuit?
Not just pursuit, right? Or that was the Declaration of Independence, right? Because
go ahead.
We should be able to be happy.
Just be happy.
Yeah, we should. But here's the thing, and y'all are probably going to think I'm smoking dope. But for me, it's not arriving at the happy. It's the trail that got me there, which would be the pursuit. Right. And, our journey is not always going to be happy. No. We're going to have all kinds of, just go look back at Pilgrim's Progress. The dude did not have an easy walk through the landscape. He really didn't. He had ups and downs, and that's what we're supposed to do. Again, back to those positive and negative emotions. We have to have each of them, but what we're missing is that who shapes them. It should be up to the parents. It should not be up to the school, especially through this guise of mind control.
Right.
Yeah. Now, I think that, to just be fair to him is, I think what he was getting at is that the pursuit has forced us into doing doing things that we may not necessarily would prefer to do, and I don't know if I can really, describe what it is
I
he was
think I
actually
know where
saying.
you're going, and I see the point. I do,
Yeah,
and it's a
yeah.
valid point. It
And
absolutely
I see your
is.
point
Yeah.
as well, because we all
Yeah.
have a path, and this is also gets into Buddhist thinking, right, where it's like
Mhm.
the balance, the balance of the well-tuned string, right, of the
Mhm.
instrument is what he was always talking about. But
Right.
also it's like pain is inevitable,
Mhm.
but suffering is optional, right? And so understanding your
Mhm.
path and how to live life without going one way or the other, and understanding that
Right.
there's a balance to life, and understanding that we do have pain, but we learn from that, right?
And I think that's very good, and I'm glad you brought that aspect up. But as far as the path goes, it should be up to us. But we see that our government is so busy directing it, especially through education. These students, K through 12, higher education, returning adults, people getting out of jail, going back to school, retired veterans, they don't stand a chance because the path is being shaped for them.
Right.
Very quickly, we have about 10 minutes left.
Yes, yes.
Could you please talk to me or talk to us a little bit about S686?
Oh, that trade wreck from hell. Okay.
I mean, I know that it's a lot to unpack and we only have a few minutes.
Yes, we do. Okay, so
but-
I'm going to hit the high notes of this. Okay, supposedly, and this is another aspect of the government trying to take away what we know, because this Restrict Act stands for Restricting the Emergence of Security Threats That Risk Information and a Communications Technology Act. Now, it's supposed to target 4 countries, and the unintended, although it's probably intended, consequences are we the people, in the fact that if we are interacting over the internet, not just with these 4 countries, but we somehow are sharing some of their content, or we are independent media and we are sharing content, and it happens to go out beyond and end up in some of these countries. The government gets to define what's kosher, what's not kosher in this. It will look at your current activity, your past activity with communications and technology, as well as what you might be doing in the future. Now, how the heck they can do that, I don't know. But the damning part about this Restrict Act is that it ties to the Patriot Act. Oh, let's think about how surveillance friendly that one is.
Yeah.
It ties us to the FIPA, which is the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policy Making, that Trump signed into law, which is an Orwellian data raping mechanism for surveillance as well.
Wow.
And then, if that's not bad enough, taking all that tracks you and stacks you and racks you, we have the USMCA, which took the place of NAFTA, the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement. So this is giving us an executive chokehold over information that we can easily access, that we have a First Amendment right to. It goes after our First Amendment freedom of speech, freedom to assemble, freedom to share information. It also gives a new avenue for Congress to come up with more executive branch committees over every aspect of our lives. It will look at your software, your hardware, and anything connected in between. It will look at your e-commerce and your banking. And here's the damning part. If you are found guilty of any of this, $250,000 fine to start, 20 years imprisonment, and the punishments go up to $1 million. And if that's not bad enough, the final showcase shows us that they will remove all your tangible and intangible property.
Wow.
There's another mic drop, right?
Yeah, another mic drop.
And I've been hearing about this, and I'm glad you summarized it for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this is this is beyond the pale, right? It's just
It absolutely is. And here's another thing, if we have just enough time to bring this in.
sure.
If you go to Hatchet versus Internet Archive or the Wayback Machine, okay? And I can send you the link if you want to share it with others, but this is a petition to get people to let's stand up with the Wayback Machine and the Internet Archives, because Hatchet is one of those big name publishers, along with Penguin Books and Random House and some of these others. They've all gotten together as these big publishers, and they're going, we're missing out on profits that people are getting internet access to. So you've got all these kind of books on the Wayback Machine and all this information on the Wayback Machine and the Internet Archive, and we're not getting a piece of the pie. So they're taking it to court, is what they're doing.
Wow.
It just went through the Second Circuit based out of New York. The court sided with the big publishers that, yes, Internet Archive and Wayback Machine need to go away because that's bad, bad, bad. But if you look at the service that Internet Archive gives independent media like us, because think about all the documents that have been on the Wayback Machine or Internet Archive that we've been able to get to lend credence to what we're reporting on, so that it's not just, well, they're over there, pulling their thumb out of their bottom going, oh, I think I'll write about this. No. And the example that was given, I did a show on this last night with my teammate Suzanne, and she was talking about, she went back and was doing some research, and there were some things that had been scrubbed about Trump. And it was only when she went to the Wayback Machine that she was able to find the actual press releases and statements proving he had said A, B, C, and D. But now if you go look for it, you can't find it anywhere.
Right.
So if we lose that,
Right.
we are losing history. And if you look at the other thing I tweeted out this morning, what did Mark say? You want to monkey with people, you remove their history.
Exactly. Well, that's what Karl Marx said.
Oh, yeah.
That's what
This is basically, creating the memory hole, right?
Right.
So you might as well have the Nazis regime right back at your door to come to your house and take all your books away, because we're not going to have access to information that we have a right to.
Yeah, please email us that.
Yes, let me do that right this second while I'm.
We actually have a friend that works for the Internet Archive.
Oh, honey, then y'all should be doing a marathon on this, because this is horrid. I mean, it is really, really bad. And I say that, I wish I had better words to express just how awful this is, because I've said it with a lot of things. But I don't think I've seen in recent history something going this overtly in our face about, we're coming after everything you hold near and dear as far as documentation. I don't think I've seen that. Yeah.
And with everything else, regarding this law that you were just talking about, as we've been discovering, as Julie's been documenting in her work, there is a lot of debt to repay to the central banks, and the governments, the states are doing their best to find ways to pay that. Right. And if they have to pulverize us in order to do that, they will.
Yeah, well, we've seen our government kill people for the name of profit. One of the things that Kathy was talking about, that the reason why we have such big numbers in drug trafficking and human trafficking is because it's what's funding things like the mind control, the MK Ultra, and that sort of thing.
Right.
And I don't doubt it after what I've heard.
Yeah, so we're basically out of time, and I just want to encourage people to follow Common Core Diva, definitely on Twitter, and it's commoncorediva.com, correct?
That is.
You are very busy lady, so we really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us this morning or this afternoon. I'm sure that our viewers and our listeners will get a lot out of this conversation. We're going to make it into an audio file, and it'll go on all of the platforms. So,
well, thank you for this conversation, because I think this is something that we don't need to just talk about once. and then send people on their merry way. I think that they need to take this and let's start having more conversations. Talk with your friend who works for this. I'm sure they know all about this, but the more we know, the more we can fight back. And absolutely. So yeah, anytime you guys want to hang out, just let me know.
Okay.
You got
All
it.
right, great.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
You too.
Okay, you too.
Bye-bye.
All right, Julie, that was a great conversation.
It was, and I'm glad. We should maybe think about doing that again, bringing more people on, bringing Lynne on again.
Yeah, because it's an unusual thing. Usually it's just you and I talking
on Friday Footnote.
But I think this is interesting, and it's similar to our poll quote series.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So,
all right, guys. Well, have a great weekend. Share this with your friends, and we'll speak to you next time.
All right, great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.